What would you do if a stranger from the diner showed up after your tire mysteriously went flat? I barely had time to call 911 before he smashed my window, reaching inside like he'd planned this for hours. I live in Washington, in the Pacific Northwest. I used to work at a late-night dinner on the side of the highway. I was 29 years old. I worked the closing shift pretty often. The dinner would close at 2 a.m., which was incredibly late considering how sparsely populated the area is. But given the proximity to the highway, there would usually be at least one or two customers until closing time. Having grown up in the South, I can tell you, the people are different up here. In the South, there's a huge emphasis on hospitality and small talk. Up here, people are kind, but not overly friendly. The air lends itself more to introversion. Down south, the customers were a lot chattier. Up here, people seemed to want to keep to themselves. This was approaching closing time. The kitchen's last call was technically 2 a.m., even though it was frowned upon to order that late. It happened that night. Though, there were only 2 employees in the building, myself and the chef. It was 1:50 a.m. when a lone, heavy-set man walked in. He was wearing awkwardly high jeans, a gray shirt tucked into a brown jacket, and had a brown mustache and glasses. I asked if he'd like to sit at the bar or a table, and he asked for a table. He kept smiling the whole time, so I smiled back. I gave him a menu and informed him the kitchen closed in 10 minutes. He looked at the menu for a few seconds and said he'd like a black coffee and French toast. He introduced himself as Nolan Luckley. His order was simple enough. I told the chef, who reacted with a slightly annoyed face, which I just responded to with "I know." I stepped back out to the dining area, and Nolan waved me over. He struck up a conversation, which was unusual for folks around here. At this hour, he asked if I was from the area and complained about the potholes. Basic small talk. I did tell him I was from around here, and he pressed a bit too specifically about where. I gave a vague, general area. I never tell people exactly where I live. He said he just moved to town. I analyzed his body language. He seemed like a somewhat nerdy older guy, and this may have been his idea of flirting. It didn't bother me much. I dealt with it back home all the time. Since he was the last customer, the chef personally came out and placed his food on the counter. I grabbed it and brought it to Nolan. By this point, everything else was ready to close up shop. I wiped down the counters and tables. I stayed behind the counter, further away from Nolan, because my social energy was drained. I was ready to get home. When he finally finished, I dropped off his check before he even asked for it. Polite, non-verbal cue that we were closed. He paid by card and left. The chef would be closing up. So, after cleaning Nolan's table, I gathered my things and said goodbye. There were 3 cars in the lot. Mine, the chef's, and a third one I couldn't explain. It was a silver, older-looking car. Maybe a 2005 Toyota or Audi. I couldn't tell if someone was inside because it was so dark. It was parked on the dirt closest to the highway. I wondered if it was Nolan's car. I got in my car and started heading home. The drive is about 20 minutes. I was on the highway when a ding came from my dashboard. The tire pressure screen popped up. I started freaking out. I didn't know how to change a tire, and it never even called roadside assistance. The pressure to my rear passenger tire was dropping rapidly from 20 down to 10. Then the entire car started to shake. I had to pull off the road. I came to a stop and got out real quick to look at the tire. It was as flat as could be. Suddenly, as if they were just flicked on, a pair of headlights lit up the side of the road, approaching me, then slowing to a stop. I hurried back inside my car and locked the door. There was a light tap at my window. I looked up and saw Nolan, the man from the restaurant. He waved at me with a smile. He was wearing gloves now. "Kathy, is that you? Are you okay?" he said through the window, laughing like it was such a coincidence. I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew instantly he did this. I'm not a dumbass. He motioned for me to lower the window. I lowered it maybe 2 inches, just enough to speak. He asked if I needed help. I told him I had a flat tire. He played dumb, asking which one. I said the back passenger side. He started walking over to the other side. At this moment, I dialed 911 on my phone. I let the phone sit on my lap as Nolan walked back to my side. He said through the window, with his creepy smile, that he knows how to change a flat. He asked me to step out of the car. I'm waiting for my boyfriend to come and help me change it. I lied. I heard the 911 operator speaking, but it wasn't loud enough for Nolan to hear. I tried to make my situation clear to the operator without tipping him off. I'm not sure how I got a flat, but I'm waiting for my boyfriend to come help me change it. Thanks for offering to help. Sir. He stood there for a second with a much less friendly look on his face. Then he walked away from the window. I took this opportunity to speak very quietly into the phone. This man slashed my tire, and he's trying to get me out of the car. The operator asked my location, and I quickly opened the map to tell her the road name. The deafening shattering of glass, immediately to my left, made me scream. Shards fell onto my lap. I screamed at the top of my lungs. I'm on the phone with the police. It's the police, showing him the screen. He looked at my screen, then reached inside the car. I screamed again, hysterically crying, expecting him to grab me or choke me. Instead, he grabbed my phone and launched it toward the highway. He ran back to his car and sped off down the dark road. I heard the screeching of his tires as he made a sharp right turn and disappeared. I wanted to look for my phone, but with no flashlight. I'd be running out there in the pitch dark. The only light was from my car. I had no choice but to wait and pray. Nolan didn't come back. I'm very grateful I was able to tell the operator my location in time. I heard the unmistakable sound of sirens in the distance and started to cry tears of joy. I got out and waved my arms until I saw the flashing lights turn off the highway. Pretty soon, a second and third police car showed up. We found my phone. It was completely destroyed. I described the man and his car to them and pointed the direction he went. One officer left in that direction while they put the word out on the radio. They were honestly the nicest cops I'd ever met. They changed my tire for me, and one even gave me an escort home. The main officer told me they would investigate the surveillance video from the dinner. I got a call a week later, informing me the investigation was still ongoing based on the footage. That was the last I heard. I don't think they caught him. Sadly, I never returned to that diner job. I was not risking that man ever finding me again. What would you do if a stranger from work showed up at your dinner, then appeared in the car beside you at a red light? I barely made it home before I found him standing on my lawn, staring up at my window with that same eerie grin. I'm a 15-year-old guy working at an amusement park in upstate New York. This happened only a year ago, and it still gives me chills just thinking about it. It was a crisp October Sunday, one of the last few days the park would be open before closing until May. It seemed like just another normal day at work. But boy, was I wrong. I had been working at my station for about 5 hours. I looked at my watch. 下午4点55分. My shift ended in 5 minutes. I felt relieved and exhausted as I began packing up my things. Suddenly, a man with a scraggly beard and messy hair approached me. He was wearing a gray t-shirt with stains on it and black sweatpants covered in holes. I thought to myself, I just need to get through this last one. Can I help you? I asked. He stared at me for a few seconds, constantly turning his head as if someone were following him. I was starting to get creeped out. Sir, can I help you? I repeated, starting to sound a little annoyed. He looked at me and finally responded, whispering with a stutter. Where are your bathrooms? Up the hill to the right. I responded cheerfully, just wanting him to leave. The man started walking in that direction, but as he did, he kept turning back to look at me. I avoided eye contact, even though I was more freaked out than ever. The second my coworker came to take my spot, I grabbed my things and practically sprinted to the back room to punch out. I changed out of my work clothes, headed to the employee parking lot, and waited for my coworker Jordan to pick me up. After waiting for what seemed like hours, Jordan finally arrived. Before going home, we went to the local diner to grab some cheeseburgers while eating. I noticed something odd. The same man I helped find the bathrooms was sitting a couple of tables down. He was staring right at me. My heart skipped a beat. I told Jordan about it, but he just shrugged it off. Probably just a coincidence. Ben, don't worry. I agreed, even though I was pretty concerned. After dinner, we got back in the car and started the 35 minutes drive back home. At the first red light we came to, my heart stopped. Sitting in a white Honda to the right of us was the man from the park and the diner. Sure enough, he was staring back at me. I told Jordan, and he finally started to worry. When we arrived at my street, we took a couple of laps around the block to make sure the man wasn't following us. Once it was clear, Jordan dropped me off. My mom and sister were at the mall, and my dad was on a business trip. So I was home alone. I locked up and jumped immediately into bed. Then, I heard a noise at my window. I slowly got up and looked outside, seeing something that will forever send chills down my spine. Right there on my front lawn was the man, looking right up at my window. Smiling, I grabbed my phone and called 911 instantly. Once the police arrived, the man was gone. I quit my job at the amusement park. Right after that, I haven't seen the man since, but it was an experience I'll never forget. What would you do if a customer from your dinner showed up at your door in the middle of the night begging for help, while her partner lurked in the shadows? I barely escaped before they got inside, but the message they left still haunts me. I worked a late-night shift at a diner for about a year. It was a rainy night pouring. Actually, nights like these usually meant fewer customers because people aren't exactly rushing to drive in the rain. I was expecting a slow shift, and for the most part, I was working until midnight and closer to the end of my shift. A man and a woman walked in. They were an odd pair. He looked about 40, and she looked significantly younger, maybe in her 20s. They both stared at me the second they walked in, so I went over to greet them. They said just two, so I brought them to a table. They took a while to order, whispering quietly to each other the whole time. After they finally ordered, the man started striking up a conversation with me. I'm a generally talkative person, which is why I've always thrived in the hospitality industry. So, I started chatting their ears off. Since it was dead in there, it was your typical waitress customer back and forth, but the girl oddly didn't say much. The man did most of the talking, so I directed my attention to him. I can't remember every last thing we said, but one thing stuck in my head. The man asked, "Do you live alone?" I did live alone, and I still do. I answered honestly, saying I lived about 10 minutes north up the road, and that it was really quiet and boring around there. At the time, I didn't see the question as a red flag. It was a bit strange. But seeing a man with another female makes you automatically assume they aren't a threat. I made jokes about being stuck in this town forever, and then walked away. About 45 minutes later, they finished and left. Fast forward an hour, and we were closing up. I said goodbye to my coworkers and rushed to my car to avoid getting soaked. It was still pouring. I drove home slowly because of the conditions the second I got home. I ran straight to the front door and let myself in. I didn't even notice that neither of the other tenants' cars were parked outside. I lived on the first floor of a home with 3 apartments. There's a side entrance with a stairway that connects all 3 floors, but being on the ground level meant I could just use the main front door. I set my keys on the kitchen counter, and suddenly there was a manic pounding at the door. It was nearly 1 a.m. I had no idea who it could be. There are 2 doors, the glass storm door and the inner solid door. I always keep both locked. I opened the inner door and saw a girl on the other side of the glass. She was drenched, wearing a gray sweater with the hood up, partially obscuring her face. She begged me through the door to let her in, so she could use a phone. I had to feel her out first. I asked if she was lost. She replied that a creepy man was following her and she needed help. Something about her was strikingly familiar. I asked who the man was and where he was. She turned around and said, "I don't know. but she kept begging me to open the door, even trying the handle herself. Then I realized why she looked familiar. She was the girl from the dinner. I asked her straight up, "Weren't you at my dinner before?" She didn't acknowledge the question. Maybe she didn't hear me. But she turned around again and started freaking out, pounding on the glass and yelling, "There he is." I looked beyond her to the street. A large man was walking slowly toward the house. As he got closer, the girl looked at me with a confused expression, wondering why I wasn't falling for it. The man got close enough for me to confirm it was the guy from the diner. I think she saw the realization in my eyes. She turned to the man and screamed, "Go." The man started charging at the house. I slammed the inner door shut and deadbolted it. I didn't wait to hear them knock. I ran to the internal stairway to get my upstairs neighbors. But the stairway door was locked from my side. I unlocked it and ran up banging on their doors. No answer. I ran to the basement unit. No answer. That's when I looked out the window and realized the driveway was empty. I was alone in the house. I went back into my apartment and locked the stairway door behind me. My mind was racing. It was obviously a trap to get me to open the door so they could rob me. Or worse. It suddenly made sense why he asked if I lived alone. I sat on the couch for a few minutes, listening to the pouring rain, trying to decide if I should call the police. I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth when I heard it. A knocking sound. I left the bathroom to listen. I was right. It was coming from the stairway door, the one connected to the common hallway. Someone was inside the house. I walked over, thinking maybe a tenant had come home. "Who is it?" No response. They knocked again. I called out both tenants' names. Nothing. I screamed, "If you don't identify yourself, I'm calling the police." They definitely heard me. They knocked once again. "What do you want?" I yelled. A voice from the other side simply said, "Your blood on me." I ran to my bedroom, locked myself inside, and hid in the closet while dialing 911. The sounds of the rain, wind, and thunder constantly startled me, making any noise from inside the house. It was the longest 10 minutes of my life before the dispatcher told me the police were at the front door. I let them in, and they searched the front and backyards, but found no one. They suggested I find another place to sleep, so I packed a bag and drove to my parents' house. I returned the next day. There was a knock at the stairway door, but this time it was actually my upstairs neighbor. I opened it, and he pointed at the outside of my door, looking disturbed. "What's this about?" he asked. I looked and was horrified. Written in marker on the wood was a message. "Thanks for the service, Beth." I couldn't stay there. I lived with my parents for a few weeks until I found a new apartment the following month. Better safe than sorry.